Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I'm breaking down Dynasty trades. Make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe if you haven't. Let's go. First trade, Jayden Daniels plus Nico Collins in the news. So I picked this one to start with. Or Joe Burrow in a 10-team Superflex. So we're going to start by going through where I have these players ranked, and then we will go through process and a verdict. So I have Joe Burrow, quarterback 6, Jayden Daniels, quarterback 11, and Nico Collins after his extension at wide receiver 15. So how do I break down this trade, Jayden Daniels and Nico Collins for Joe Burrow? Collins' recent extension improves his value for me. Replacing Burrow's known high-end production for me with Daniels is tough, but Daniels offers rushing upside that Burrow never will because Burrow has 11.6 rushing yards a game, just 10 total rushing touchdowns in his career. And we are in a 10-team Superflex, which means that you can find quarterbacks. So the overall value of quarterbacks is less versus wide receivers like Nico Collins because there's less quarterback scarcity. So my verdict, Jayden Daniels and Nico Collins side over Joe Burrow. I like the insulated value that Collins has now. Daniels is 4 years younger than Burrow. Not super important, but I'm going to go with the Daniels and Collins side here. Next trade, Trey McBride or random 25 first, 10-team, 1 quarterback. So I have Trey McBride at tight end 2, and I haven't yet put in my 2025 pick scale on the Patreon. It's a big part of my Patreon rankings is comparing them to future picks, comparing players to future picks. But I'm going to get that up there soon. So if you're interested in that, sign up for the Patreon and you'll be able to see it. As for my process on this trade, McBride is elite. He turns 25 in November, and he averaged 6.6 catches and 65.5 yards a game once becoming the full-time starter in 2023. Elite assets like this are hard to find in one quarterback because quarterbacks don't carry the same elite value that they do in Superflex. Additionally, even though it's a 10-team league, the risk of trading a future first is slightly lower because you're not going to miss out on a stud quarterback. So for me, Trey McBride is the pick here over a 2025 first. Assuming you don't think the pick is super early and you have a contender, it's all good to make this move. This is the kind of move that can supercharge a contending team, especially if you don't have a high-end tight end like Trey McBride. Trade number 3, Drake London and Trey Benson, or A.J. Brown and Roschon Johnson, 12-team, 1 quarterback, start 8. So if we look at where I have these players ranked, I have Drake London, wide receiver 12, Trey Benson, running back 14, A.J. Brown, wide receiver 9, and Roschon Johnson, running back 47. So to go down from the wide receiver 9 to the wide receiver 12, you pick up the running back 14 for the RB 47. Just if you look at it that way. Now, what are my process thoughts on this trade? So you're getting out of an older wide receiver in A.J. Brown for a younger one in Drake London. Of course, Trey Benson is far greater than Roschon Johnson, both as a prospect and in terms of their dynasty value. Benson also has superior draft capital. But A.J. Brown is the only high-end producer proven here. Drake London is still more of a maybe, and we have to accept that. However, if forced to choose, I would take the Drake London side. A.J. Brown is worth a lot, but he did struggle down the stretch in 2023. And Trey Benson, for me, is a pretty significant dynasty asset that I would be happy to have on my team. I feel like, again, if forced to choose, I would take the Drake London side. If I had A.J. Brown, I do actually think you can get more than this. But if choosing between the sides and I have no choice, I would rather have the Drake London side just for the flexibility of the younger ascending assets. Now, if you like my YouTube content, specifically this kind of trade discussion, hearing about my process, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get access to my rankings, the Discord, and the ability to ask advanced questions for my YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month, and all support goes towards this independent content where I can say what I want. It's not controlled by any corporation, any editors. But in order to do that, requires independent support to exist. And of course, as always, I'll help you have fun and win some fantasy leagues. With that said, let's move into the next trade. This one's a little bit more complicated. Jalen Hurts plus Zach Moss plus Hollywood Brown, or Trevor Lawrence, Isiah Pacheco, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, 12-team superflex. So this is a lot, but Jalen Hurts, I have quarterback 4, Zach Moss, RB 34, Hollywood Brown, RB 45, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback 12, Isiah Pacheco, RB 13, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 23. So at the end of the day, Hurts is the only elite asset in here. He's still an elite quarterback. He had, we'll bring that up there. Double-digit rushing touchdowns in all of the last 3 years. Unless that disappears, which it won't, he'll create more fantasy value than Trevor Lawrence by a lot. The other assets on the Lawrence side, Isiah Pacheco is a running back without draft capital, and JSN kind of had a rough rookie year. He's not proven, which hurts the idea of choosing that side of the trade. So for me, the verdict, I'll easily take the Jalen Hurts side. Even if you took Moss and Brown off, is Trevor Lawrence, Isiah Pacheco, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba enough for Jalen Hurts? I mean, it's close. I'd have to think about it. So when you add Zach Moss and Hollywood Brown to kind of lessen the blow of losing Pacheco and JSN in the short term, it's an easy decision to take the Jalen Hurts side in this trade. Next up, James Cook or Tyjae Spears in a 25-second, 12-team superflex. So I have James Cook RB11 and Tyjae Spears RB17. But they're not in the same tier for me. James Cook is at least a tier above Tyjae Spears. So how do I look at this trade? Cook is a relatively sure thing, at least for the running back position. He's done it before. In 2023, he had 237 carries, 1,122 yards, just 2 touchdowns on the ground, 4.7 yards a carry, and 44 catches, 445 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Ray Davis is not going to take Cook's starting job, and Cook barely scored rushing touchdowns anyway. So Davis getting some goal line carries is barely even going to hurt Cook. In contrast, Spears is a good player, but he's unproven. Last year, he had just 100 carries, 453 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4.5 yards a carry, and 52 catches, 385 yards, and a touchdown. Tony Pollard is a Spears clone, good on low volume, good as pass catcher, and the new regime brought him in. They keep talking about how the 2 backs are identical. I think Spears is better, but do they? I'm not sure about that. So my verdict is that I would rather have James Cook. The package just isn't enough to sell Cook. I have Cook RB13 in redraft, and Spears is just RB32. So you're giving up a lot in terms of this year's value off of James Cook. I need more to make this deal. Now, speaking of the Titans, more Titans players. Sorry. Calvin Ridley in a 25-second, or Will Levis, 12-team superflex. So I have Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 43, and Will Levis, quarterback 25. Now, this process is interesting. So I have almost no interest in either of these 2 players. I don't like them. Ridley turns 29 in season, and Levis is a holdover quarterback from an old regime without first-round draft capital. Those players don't tend to succeed. Let's look at what Levis did last year. So Levis had a 58.4% completion, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 7.1 yards per attempt, and just 25 carries for 57 yards and touchdown. So Levis's 2023 stats, if this is how good he is, will not earn him a franchise quarterback job or even a starting job in 2025. He'll have to be significantly better than that. And also, he provides no rushing ability at all. So he's not going to get fantasy value that way. However, I hate both players here. Calvin Ridley is old. And no matter what he does, he'll be 29 years old after the season. His dynasty value is not coming back. So since I don't like Levis and I don't like Ridley, in order to decide what I want to do on a trade like that, I look at what happens if my player takes wrong. If Levis is great, he'll be a franchise quarterback and have gained a lot of dynasty value. He's still young, especially in a super flex. So if I have to choose, I will gamble on Will Levis being good. And that side just has way more upside than Calvin Ridley in the 25-second. Now, I have some news today. Kind of hinted at it earlier. So let's jump into that. Nico Collins got an extension from the Texans. 3 years, $72.75 million, $52 million guaranteed. It runs from 2025 to 2027 after his rookie contract ends in 2024 this year. Guarantees means he's likely solid on the team through 2026 with a relatively easy out for 2027 if the Texans want out. But he's tied to CJ Stroud for Stroud's entire rookie deal, which is great. I think that this contract means that Collins is the Texans wide receiver one. It's a lot of money. It's $24 million a year. They have no commitment to Stefon Diggs beyond this year. They ripped up the rest of his contract. Tank Dell is a good player, but he struggled with injuries and isn't as proven. So looking at these players in Dynasty, I moved Collins up from wide receiver 18 to wide receiver 15. With the contract, knowing he's tied to an elite quarterback, Nico Collins is a cornerstone asset now, and we can treat him as such. He's still just 25 years old. As for Tank Dell, no change. I have him at wide receiver 26. I never thought they would let Nico Collins walk, but having the contract in hand is nice. As for Dell, I think he's a little bit unproven. I'm not sure that he's going to be ahead of Stefon Diggs in the pecking order this year. So I just think, given his range of outcomes, wide receiver 26 is a good price for him. And same with Stefon Diggs, wide receiver 44. I always thought that the Diggs deal was a one-year deal and that Collins and Dell were their long-term top two wide receivers. So we'll have to see what Diggs does this year and then what he does next year. But I didn't move him in Dynasty because I honestly didn't think he'd be a Texan beyond this year. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. As I said earlier, patrons get to ask advanced questions for my YouTube. I have one Patreon question today, so let's just jump into that right now. Do we think Quentin Johnston has any bounce back value? Second year NFL, Jim Harbaugh turns him into something. I'm not going to say it's hopeless, but I'm not in on him. Last year, he had 38 catches, 431 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 2.2 catches, and 25.4 yards a game. Mike Williams got hurt. He still did nothing. Nothing at all. But yes, if the deal is that I'm trading like a 25 third for Quentin Johnston, yes, that I would do. But remember, he's from an old regime, an old coaching staff, an old general manager drafted him, not this regime. This regime drafted Ladd McConkey. So while I think it's possible that Johnston bounces back, I would probably bet against it. But there is, of course, a price. Actually, I think his consensus price is even lower than I have him. So I'm not opposed to drafting him in a startup if he falls really, really far. Of course, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the YouTube channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, redraft, rookie content, start sit, and more. Every sign up helps support my independent fantasy football content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all